Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday hailed the start of a renewed dialogue with the U.S., saying that the administration of President Donald Trump showed a pragmatism, a realistic view, and noting that it had abandoned the stereotypes and messianic ideological cliches of its predecessors. The first contacts with the new U.S. administration encouraged certain hopes, Putin said at a meeting with top officials of the Federal Security Service, Russia's top domestic security agency. There is a mutual readiness to work to restore relations and gradually solve a colossal amount of systemic strategic problems in the global architecture, he said. According to Associated Press, he hailed the Russian troops fighting in Ukraine, saying that their courage and resilience had created the conditions for the beginning of talks on a peaceful settlement. He added that the resumption of U.S.-Russian contacts vexed many in Europe and emphasized that Russian diplomats and security agencies should focus their efforts on resisting attempts to derail U.S.-Russian talks.
Первые контакты с новой американской администрацией вселяют определенные надежды. Есть встречный настрой работать на восстановление межгосударственных отношений. Но постепенное решение колоссального объема накопившихся системных стратегических проблем в мировой архитектуре. А именно эти проблемы в свое время спровоцировали и украинские, и другие региональные кризисы. Важно, что наши сегодняшние партнеры демонстрируют прагматизм, реальный взгляд на вещи. Отказываются от многих стереотипов, так называемых правил и мессианских идеологических клише своих предшественников, которые, собственно, и привели к кризису всей системы международных отношений. Сегодняшние динамичные изменения в международном ландшафте – это в огромной степени результат мужества и стойкости наших вооруженных сил, наших героев. Именно они своей доблестью, своими ежедневными победами создали условия для начала серьезного диалога. Понимаем, что не всех устраивает возобновление российско-американских контактов. Часть западных элит по-прежнему настроена на сохранение нестабильности в мире. И эти силы будут пытаться сорвать или скомпрометировать начавшийся диалог. Мы это с вами видим. Нам нужно это учитывать и использовать все возможности дипломатии и специальных служб для срыва подобных попыток.
Putin again distinguished himself with another comical statement. Speaking in the Kremlin and drinking champagne with Russian occupiers, he declared that the war with Ukraine was an honorable mission, supposedly pleasing to the Lord. This statement became a new explanation of the war after the previous versions about NATO, Nazis, and historical lands had become rather worn out and only caused new ridicule of the elderly Russian dictator. Others say that Putin's mental health problems have led to him developing a persistent delusion of grandeur as he ages. It was fate, it was God's will that such a difficult but honorable mission should fall on our shoulders to defend Russia, Putin said, addressing the military, which included an officer accused by Ukraine of shooting civilians. Social media users and international analysts did not hold back their sarcasm. First there was a special operation, then protection from NATO, then the return of Peter I's lands, now God is to blame. Putin, make up your mind. Commentators write. 5 justifications of Putin in 3 years of war. February 2022, a decision was made to conduct a special military operation, a formal explanation that quickly lost its credibility. June 2022, how Peter I returned the lands. October 2022, NATO has crawled to the borders. October 2023, coup d'état and conspiracy of the West. February 2025, so it was willed by the Lord. Each new explanation seems more absurd than the previous one. And if at the beginning of the war the Kremlin tried to appeal to the threat to NATO and defense of Donbass, now there are no arguments left except references to higher powers. Putin looks like a schoolboy who forgot his homework and makes up excuses on the fly. Either the neighbors disturbed him, or the dog ate his notebook, and now it's God's fault, commentators write. It is noteworthy that Putin has already contradicted himself in his speeches. If in 2022 he said that he made the decision to invade personally, now he claims that it was the will of God. Such inconsistency only underscores the Kremlin's confusion amid the protracted conflict and growing losses, which, according to Western estimates, already exceed 800,000 people. If this is an honorable mission, then why have even Russia's allies begun to distance themselves? And what will be the next explanation? Alien intervention. Joke on social networks. As Putin searches for new reasons to justify the war, discontent and fatigue are growing in Russia.
Неизвестных солдат было, даже не знает никто. Благодаря их усилиям, их мужеству, их труду тяжелому.
Soldiers of the 25th Separate Airborne Sykslav Brigade took control of the settlement of Kotlino in the Pokrovsky direction. This was reported by the brigade's press service and shown a video. During the assault recovery operations, the paratroopers cleared the settlement of Russians, the occupation of which would have allowed the Russians to reach the Pokrovsk-Dnepr highway, which is why the enemy had thrown significant forces into capturing it at the time. The Sykslav paratroopers and related units did not allow the Russians to gain a foothold in Kotlino and drove the occupiers out of its borders. The brigade explained that the occupation of Kotlino would have allowed the occupiers to reach the Pokrovsk-Dnepr highway, which is why the Russians had thrown significant forces into capturing it. This could have significantly worsened the logistical support of the entire Pokrovsk direction. As the commander of one of the brigade's battalions, Sergei Gera, said, his fighters began carrying out tasks in this direction on January 29. The operation was planned in 4 stages: stabilize the situation, inflict maximum damage on the occupiers, cut off all approaches to the village and occupy it. One assault group entered on foot, but the second entered using vehicles. One of the groups that drove in, it blew up on a mine. Thank God, no losses, well, yes, light concussions, light shrapnel. However, these guys refused to be evacuated, they unloaded. They came in, contact, 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 prisoner, contact, prisoner. Russians don't give a damn about their personnel, said military man Vitaly Sid. In the end, the Sykslav paratroopers and related units drove the Russians out of Kotlino. After the Ukrainian fighters took up positions, the occupiers are not allowed to approach, they destroy everything on the approaches, Sid said. During the assault operations, the Russians lost equipment as well as personnel. 275 soldiers were killed and 203 were wounded.